Hi guys, it's KJ from Forward Life Coaching, and I'm here today talking about TBI, concussion, so many other things with a, hold on one second, with a neurotherapy unit supervisor, Tammy Abbott Thiel. Tammy Abbott Thiel, we met actually on Clubhouse in a chat room when we were talking about mental health, and she started to talk about her story about her husband, and I was just blown away by the strength of Tammy and just her story. So let me tell you a little bit about Tammy, and you'll get a feel for this, and then we'll talk more about her journey. So basically, Tammy Abbott Thiel is a neurotherapy unit supervisor. She's been in that position for 5 years. Prior to that, she worked for 23 years as a social worker. And in the neurotherapy unit, she works with, please forgive me, aneurysm, stroke, brain injury, and also spinal cord injury, and several other things with regards to cancer. Over the course of her career, Tammy has worked with, please forgive me, mental health, hospitals, and hospice as a social worker.
Yep.
Tammy became familiar with the depth of brain injuries, concussions, TBI, when she faced challenges within her own family. Her husband, who is a fireman.
He's in law enforcement.
I'm sorry, he's a policeman. I'm so sorry, I couldn't remember. Her husband, who's a policeman, went to a public service football game.
He was playing in softball with our community recreation department. So he was part of a softball team of firefighters and police officers.
Softball team. I am so sorry. Oh my gosh. So many stories are getting mixed together. Please forgive me. So he was playing softball, but I knew this because I'm getting to the next part. So while playing softball, Tammy received a call that actually changed her life, changed a lot of things in her life. There was an injury to her husband, Greg, and at that time, Greg was also the breadwinner for the house. So this injury had a greater depth. And at that time, Tammy was 5 months pregnant.
Actually, our daughter was 5 months old.
I'm sorry, the daughter was 5 months old. There we go. I'm sorry. And your daughter was 5 months old.
You're good. You're good.
But basically, Tammy's going to talk about her story of helping her husband with his rehabilitation. And rehabilitation is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So there were dismal odds in the beginning. And once again, like I said, Tammy and her husband are enjoying life. Tammy, can you, with their daughter, who is now how old?
20
years old, with their 20-year-old daughter. So it's been 20 years since this incident happened. Tammy, can you tell us a little bit about your story? Tell us, how did it begin? You and your husband, you were high school sweethearts?
We were high school sweethearts. We met when I was a sophomore and he was a senior. We dated for 5 years and got married when I was 21 because I wanted to be able to drink at my wedding.
Good answer.
Right?
Good answer.
Goals. We spent 5 years playing. We were young. We wanted to make sure that we had lots of adventures before we had kids because we didn't want to resent our kids keeping us from the things we wanted to do. Got pregnant, had our daughter, and 5 months into new parenting, he was off at a softball game. I was home because the little one needed to go to bed at a decent hour. And it was about 9 o'clock at night. I get a phone call from one of his teammates saying, hey, Greg is on the way to the hospital. There's been an accident. You might want to meet us there. So bundled up our daughter, stuck her in the car seat, headed to the hospital. When he got there, he didn't recognize who I was, who our daughter was, kept saying he was 75. They did their work, and I will always be thankful for a physician who walked through the emergency room. One of the nurses got his attention, told him what was going on with my husband, and the physician said, get him out of here. He needs to be flight for life. We can't handle his case. So within
Wow.
30 minutes, he was on a helicopter being flight for life to a larger town. Within 5 minutes of landing, he was in surgery to remove the bleed that had resulted from the softball hit to his head. And when we met with the physician who did the surgery, my father-in-law asked, my wife is currently in Florida, should she come? And the physician said there's a 50-50 chance, if she doesn't want any regrets, she should get here. So I can
You hear this
remember.
conversation?
Pardon?
Did you hear this conversation where he said 50-50 chance?
Yeah, we were all sitting there together. So I'm holding my daughter in the ICU room where they took him after his surgery, thinking, I'm 26 and I may be having to go home and pack up my husband's life because he might not come home to us. And knowing that I'd be okay, but definitely not the optimal outcome. I think he spent a week in the ICU and then was thankfully transferred out in a more stable situation health-wise, but still definitely not cognitively intact. I don't remember if he knew who we were, but things were still not great. Stabilized to the point he was ready for rehab. And so they put him in a neuro rehabilitation program where he continued to progress, but definitely still not always 100% aware of what was going on, to the point that he one afternoon told me he was going home the next day, and my mother-in-law and I laughed like, yeah, sure, you bet. And when I talked with the staff there, they were like, oh yeah, you're going home tomorrow. Here's your script for outpatient therapy. Just find somewhere and get him therapy. Okay. So thankfully, my mother-in-law was able to come and stay with us, because trying to care for somebody who is forgetful and not always aware. If I'm remembering correctly, he was still walking with a cane because the side that was impacted physically because of the bleed was not 100% functional. So he still needed a cane to walk. She helped me get him to and from therapies, take care of our daughter. And about 2 months into the rehab at home, he kept saying speech therapy was stupid. And that actually was the most important part for his cognitive rehabilitation. Thankfully, I worked in a facility where we did rehab, and so was talking to the speech therapist there, who said, he's probably right. He's not getting the right therapy. I will start seeing him. And the change within 2 weeks was drastic, right? So
what was the difference between the first one and the second one?
So she actually was a speech therapist who focused on cognitive recovery. And so now in the work I do, I always tell families, if you want the best chance of recovery, wherever you go, make sure they're neuro trained, because there's a difference in that neurocognitive focus and a speech therapist who maybe focuses on swallow, articulation, right? Those are very different than how do you reteach the brain to process information. So thankfully, he got the right therapist. His injury happened May 9th, and working closely with therapists, going through a lot of reevaluations psychologically, neurologically, physically. He was cleared to return to full duty as a police officer, I believe, August 30th.
So how long was that from the injury to the return?
I think about 4 months.
Wow.
Ironic.
A brain bleed back to work in 4 months?
4 months. And, he was such a trooper. He had it because the police department wasn't sure, right? So they had him basically retest as if he was a new hire to make sure he was a stable officer. and then made him go through the entire training process again as if he were a new hire. So we are very thankful for the support of our family. And if there's anything I tell the families I work with, it's let people help you. If you have friends or family who can help you sit at the hospital bedside or help you with your children or come keep your loved one company at home so you can go to the grocery store or doctor's appointments, allow those things to come in so that if you're sick or you have your own doctor's appointments, it isn't a crisis for you to take care of yourself while you're caring for someone else.
Yeah. Usually they do say sometimes the caregivers wind up getting worse because they weren't taking care of themselves.
Absolutely. And, in all of the social work I've done, the other thing that can happen is there's a shift in roles. So often spouses care for spouses, which until death do us part in sickness and health. But there's a confusion when you're also a caregiver is of when can I be the husband or wife and when am I the caregiver? Because those are two very different things, right? One is a partner, life partner, support, intimacy, and the other is really being in charge of how someone functions, the care that they need on a daily basis. And so helping them try to find that balance so that they can be both and not have to give up part of their identity after a traumatic event.
Wow. When did you think that things were turning? Like, what was the light bulb that he's getting better or he's getting worse? What were some of those
The
moments?
first one was when they moved him out of ICU. That's always a good sign, right?
Yes,
Um,
definitely.
And then as his impulsivity decreased, so it's not uncommon for someone who's had a traumatic brain injury to be impulsive. They don't have good safety awareness. They bounce out of bed, not realizing maybe their left or right side doesn't work. And so a high fall risk, which he definitely was. And as that decreased and his awareness of who our daughter and I were and his family were, his speech became clearer. He was more oriented to, it's not 1974, he's not 75. As those things started to clear, I got more and more hope that we might get back to where, or as close to where we were before. But also realizing that so much had changed that I had to let go of some of that and realize that we were two very different people. You can't go through a traumatic event and expect that you're the same as you were before. So we had to redate, right? And figure out who he is, how did the brain injury change his thoughts, his attitude, and the same for me.
Is there a common theme amongst the change that you see? Like because you're working in a neurotherapy section, is there something that you see that happens in the majority of your patients?
I think so. So some of the things that we figured out as a family that I encourage other families to be open to, and I think that's one of the blessings I have is I've been there, I live it, and our team is amazing, but there are some insights for that after you're out of rehab, things you may encounter and what you can do about it. So he doesn't always remember appointments or things coming up. And we created a joint calendar so that instead of having to ask me all the time and feeling frustrated because he couldn't remember, he's got the point of reference. If he's not sure what we have going on Sunday, it's there.
Where is the calendar?
In our phones, thankfully. So we just have a shared calendar through Apple that we all can use. And It's nice because, you know, even our daughter contributes to that. So we know where she's at or when she works or what she has going on. Napping for people who've had even sometimes concussions, napping more frequently due to brain fatigue.
How long is a nap?
And, huh?
How long is a nap?
You know, it can be a half an hour. It just kind of depends on what happened, and it isn't always necessary. It's just knowing that that can be helpful and reduce late day frustration, um, forgetfulness, that kind of thing. And
Wow.
it's definitely decreased over the years as the brain continued to heal and he figured out the brain made reconnections or he figured out other ways to compensate for any gaps.
Does he still play softball or does he still play sports?
It took him about 10 years and he played for one season and I think pulled his groin and he was like, I'm done with softball. It's done nothing good for me.
Wow.
So
So he doesn't play anymore.
he doesn't play anymore.
That's a good thing, right?
You know, so I go back to my mother-in-law. I remember asking me when he went into law enforcement why I supported that. And they said, you know, when it's our time to go, it's our time to go in whatever means we're meant to go. And if he can enjoy his life and feel like he's contributing and he doesn't hate going to work and he's proud of what he does, then I stand behind him. And I feel the same way with softball. If he felt like getting back on the field was important to him, then he had my support.
Mhm. There's so many benefits to exercise that, it helps with moods, anxiety, depression, self-confidence, you name it, as well as the, uh, please forgive me, your heart, your cognitive processing, your problem solving. There's so many benefits to sports.
Absolutely.
Um, I wanted to ask you, as you were talking about this and you're talking about the family support, did the family ever did the family ever discourage you at any time, or do you think the family and friends actually continue to encourage you? Like, was there any time when they seemed to say, oh, well, you're being too hopeful, or maybe we're reaching too far, or were they actually pushing you further along?
I think they pushed me further along. I can remember having a conversation with my dad where I said, you know, it was in that first couple of days in the ICU. And I said, I know he wouldn't want to live on a ventilator and I know he wouldn't want to live in a skilled nursing facility. And if they tell me they aren't sure and ask me whether or not I want to turn the ventilator off, I know what I would choose. And my dad has said, you're being very pessimistic. Don't be like that. Give things a chance to work out. So it was our family was all just there to do whatever we needed, thankfully. And I know not all families are like that.
The first doctor who you went to who said, get him out of here, we can't handle him. Why do you think they couldn't handle him? What was that hospital missing, or what was that facility?
It was a very small community hospital in a farming community in the outskirts of a major city. So it was about an hour from any metropolitan area. So they could handle minor cases, but they didn't have neurologists on staff, cardiologists on staff. It's general practitioners and nurses, general surgeons, but not the specialized care that you would receive in a larger hospital.
And what is the difference, the core difference between the concussion, the TBI, the brain bleed? What are some of the core differences? And
Sure. So
can those, I'm sorry, and then I was going to ask, can those ever be mistaken as psychological conditions instead of neurological conditions?
sure. So concussions and bleeds can both be traumatic brain injuries. Obviously, the force at which the head is hit or the body is hit and the head is shaken, affecting the brain. It determines, concussion versus traumatic brain injury. And then brain bleed is when there is some impact of a vessel with a hit or impact, whereas a concussion is just the brain has been, maybe jostled up against the skull too hard. Not hard enough to cause a bleed, but hard enough to cause resulting swelling or damage that it alters. I've heard, people suddenly have a hard time in light. Reading is hard, sitting in front of a computer for a prolonged period, anything really that requires the brain to function in a long time span is harder for them. More naps, darker spaces are all hints. Reading a neurology book by a physician recently, anytime you've had some kind of hard hit, it is very possible you've impacted your brain, whether it's, I can think as a kid, roller skating on the driveway, right? You slip and fall and conk your head, or slip and fall as you're running around the pool, football, even basketball. If individuals collide soccer, they're finding that individuals who regularly, I don't even know what they call it when they hit the soccer ball with their head, but even they are.
I was thinking that same thing.
Right? Even they are sustaining damage when that activity recurs in a long-term basis.
And so could this ever be mistaken as psychological versus neurological? Like, do you ever have patients come to you who were originally diagnosed as psychological, and then as you check the MRI or whatever it may be, you realize there's a definite neurological component?
For a lot of our individuals, they are in the midst of recovering from a traumatic event. I do know, I don't know if you've ever read Dr. Amen. He has the Amen clinics, but he talks frequently about people not realizing they have undiagnosed brain injuries, that they've been treated from a psychological perspective, right? So for depression, psychosis, bipolar, and that when they start doing brain scans in the mental health field, and certain providers do that, they are finding that there's residual brain damage that may be an underlying cause for the psychological symptoms they're experiencing.
Wow. And do you know what the recovery rate is? Are they able to, if they work on the neurological component, does that then help the psychological component?
It does. Reading a book, Change Your Brain, Change Your Mind, and it talks a lot about once they start looking at the whole person. So diet, exercise, brain exercises, the right supplements to address the inconsistent chemistry within the brain. There's a positive experience that for some individuals negates the need for psychotropic medication like antipsychotics, antidepressant, anti-anxiety, which sometimes just mask whatever else is going on.
My sons were working with Dr. Trifoletti in New Jersey, and they were working on IgG levels, correcting the IgG levels for greater cognition. And the one thing that the doctor told us is, he said, as we do this, he said, you can use steroids in between, but do not put them on antipsychotics and stimulants, because that will mask the recovery. So you'll never be able to uncover like what the true rate of recovery is with regards to, so they were doing plasma exchange, which is commonly used for neuroinflammation.
Nice.
And so, so anyway, bottom line was he told us not to use them as well, to get a feel for, as you said, what the recovery was. So,
excellent.
So as your patients progress, you're saying that there's something that your coworkers may not understand as far as the aftercare of the patient, like once they leave? So I'm guessing because you've been through this experience yourself, you understand the continuum of care, whereas some of your coworkers may understand a section, not necessarily a continuum.
I think it's more, I understand what it's like to live in the situation. They are amazing at understanding what the next steps are in the recovery process, but it's some of the, what is it like as a caregiver or spouse of someone who's recovering from a brain injury? What are some of the frustration points that they might experience? What are some of the things they may want to plan for or adjust in expectations to reduce their own frustration? Because that's very different than the logistics of, you definitely need ongoing physical, occupational, speech therapy, see your physician for any follow-up so that they can monitor whatever other risks you might have and make sure you're physically also making a full recovery as well as cognitively. It's more just kind of the, hey, I've been on your side of the bed. I get the stress of, the example I can use is, I'll probably never forget where I was standing when I got the phone call. And so teaching our team that when they call a family and the family sees the hospital phone number pop up, that we may indirectly and unintentionally be causing immense stress if the hospital is the one who called to tell them that their family member was in an accident, or in the days of touch and go in the initial stage of the injury. And so our team now calls and says, this is Tammy from Barrow. This is not an emergency. So that's the first thing we say. And then we talk about whatever we called for, but to at least let them know that their adrenal system can come off of that probably still panic mode of, oh no, why is the hospital calling now? Is everything okay?
Right. Because you love the person, you love,
Absolutely.
You love the other person. You want to make sure that they're okay. And so, yeah, the adrenaline can be high when you don't know the source of it. You don't know what it could be.
Right. Especially if you've gotten, that maybe they're having a hard time breathing and we have to put in a trach, or it's, hello, this is the emergency room. Your family member has been brought in. So, yeah.
So let me ask something. Why would someone not come to the emergency room or the hospital, or what's that marker? So somebody's playing sports, somebody's, at home, they fall, whatever. What is the point where you say don't come in or do come in to be examined?
I don't know that if they called and said they had something happen, our staff would ever say, don't come in. I think a lot of times individuals, oh, you just hit your head, you'll be okay, not realizing that there can be both a short-term impact and a long-term impact in even a minor concussion recovery.
Explain short-term versus long-term.
So short-term can be the headaches, light sensitivity, maybe problems concentrating for long periods of time. Long-term, is there impact on short-term memory? Is there an increased frequency of headaches? Are they having altered vision? There can be a lot of different effects depending upon how hard the hit was, and is that hit following other hits?
Right. Other hits that you didn't even pay attention to. Do you know what I mean? Multiple hits that you didn't pay attention to, and now you're like, oh shoot, yeah, that did add up, and blah 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 blah.
Absolutely, for sure.
So I wanted to share a few facts that I found. February 21 this year, U.S. News article says head impacts occur twice as much preseason as they do during the regular season of sports. The CDC said brain injuries cause more deaths than any other sports injury.
That isn't, I think, again, unfortunately, I work in an amazing system of physicians who are very aware of brain health, and that concussions are more than just oops, you hit your head, you'll be all right. I think it's not surprising that inadvertently what people think may be something minor with the brain could end up being something more serious. And because they may not seek immediate medical attention, because I think there's still the attitude of a small hit isn't a major issue. Individuals may not get the needed care at the right time.
Yeah. And you always want to make sure it's better safe than sorry. Better safe
Oh,
than
absolutely.
I don't know if I ever told you my story, but with my cerebral aneurysm, but basically I am my maternal aunt, uncle, and grandfather died of a cerebral aneurysm. My paternal uncle died of an aortic aneurysm. And I went to UNC, local hospital, and I said, I was doing a Bible study lesson, and everything started to get blurred. I was going back and forth between books and started to get blurred. I went to UNC. I said, look, I said, I need to get checked. I think I have an aneurysm. And they were like, well, that's a big jump, to say you have an aneurysm, it doesn't sound right. Let's get glasses, let's do this, let's do this. So I wound up doing all the things that they said, going to look at glasses, everything, but, nothing worked at that time. And I was in a very, very stressful marriage at that time too. And so I wound up going back and I said, no, I need a CAT scan, MRI. So I said, I need you to check and see if there's any inflammation. I need you to check. So because of my persistence, they finally allowed me to go get an MRI. When I went back, they didn't even call me to tell me that, that I had an aneurysm. I called them to say, hey, look, you know what, have you gotten results yet? And she said, yeah, it's nothing really to worry about. It's a 4, usually you don't worry about it until it's a 10. But my headaches kept increasing. Like I said, I was in a very stressful, my home life was very stressful. So my headaches kept increasing. So I went back 6 Fridays in a row. I was at the hospital in the ER or, scheduled appointment, getting exams. And basically, at the end of 6 weeks, my last visit, the doctor was more or less like, there's nothing I can do until it bursts. So I went back and I went back and read up, and basically 50% of aneurysms that rupture are fatal. So I said, look, I need to do something about these headaches. He said, look, and I thank God for this so much. He said, look, there's nothing I can do. I need you to go to these doctors. I'll give you these doctors who are experts in that field, and they can help. And this doctor is no longer at UNC. I don't even remember his name. So I wound up calling the other doctors, went to a doctor in Philadelphia. The doctor in Philadelphia said to me, we sent him the paperwork Tuesday at noon, 4 o'clock. He told me, we need you to come back here at 7 a.m. I was there at 7 a.m. on Wednesday, the next morning, like less than 24 hours away. And I told him, I asked him, could I go get something to eat because we did all that driving and everything? And he said, no, we need you to check in right now. He walked out the door, closed the door, and he told the assistant or the nurse or whoever was right there that my aneurysm could rupture at any moment.
Wow.
So when you talk about an accelerated pace, I went from a balloon type aneurysm to the omega with the opening. So I went from original just coil, the need for a coil, to a coil and a stent. And who knows how long I was away from the final stage. There's 3 stages for the aneurysm. So so with that, I mean, my doctor told me 2 things. He told me, 1, stay away from a stressful situation, and number 2, vacation once a month.
Nice.
So, well, vacation, it doesn't mean go to Hawaii, but it means like take a complete break, like no work, no anything. Just if you can go to the beach, go to the beach. You can go to the mountains, but just complete break from doing work or whatever it may be. And so, and I'm semi there. I'm semi there. I can't say I'm 100% there, but I'm trying. but the bottom line is, we continuously monitor that. And then at one particular time, it was a very, very stressful period. I went back and we monitored he put me on the heart monitors just to make sure I wasn't having a heart attack or anything like that. And it was all, once again, stress related. Remove the stress, remove the headache. So I say that to say that, you know, I'm a big advocate of understanding what's going on up here. When you have those headaches, go get the MRI, go get the CAT scan, because you never know how quickly that situation can grow, and you never know the extent of it, you know, just by using a subjective assessment.
Right.
And, you know, and the irritability that comes with it can be deemed something other. It can be deemed psychological instead of neurological, because, you know, your head is hurt. I mean, I just remember my head was hurting 24/7. It felt like a brick was like on it, the pressure was like this all the
Oh,
time. And I just remember that pain. And then I remember when they did the MRI with contrast, and I was not sedated, it felt like a whip was like a pin was scratching through my head.
oh,
And it was painful, but praise God, I made it through, because like I said, that was how we uncovered how the situation was increasing. And now you can call me a hypochondriac. If things get too stressful and I have pain, I am in the ER right away.
I don't blame you.
You know, so and that's why I'm actually doing this series, because I think, once again, people take for granted their health, and when they don't take the proper precautions to make sure that they are okay, or they don't take the proper measures to continue the care, like, you know, halfway through I'm better, and then, you
Right.
know, keep going, what happens is they wind up with long-term healthcare conditions, you know.
Well, and I think too, the other part you mentioned is every physician has different experiences throughout their practice. So just because one tells you that they can't do anything doesn't mean there isn't a physician out there who feels like that's their expertise. I work in an environment where we have people fly from Egypt, the Middle East, Europe, China to come for care because of the specialization that some of our physicians have that the individuals cannot find in their own country or even a country closer to their home.
I meant to tell you this. So remember I told you my doctor gave me three doctors to connect with that were, I think it was three to connect with that were experts. The doctor that he was sending me to was in Arizona. So it was one of the top ones in the nation. And we're only three that he gave me, and the three that he gave me were the best. And I want to say one was in your Barrow in Arizona. There was one in California. No, I think he only gave me two, but the third one was the one that we found in Philadelphia. And I don't know if he was one of the top three. I think he was one of the top five. But the bottom line is, I had three choices, but one of the choices was your hospital in Arizona. I meant to tell you that as a surprise, but I kept forgetting
That's
to tell
very
you
cool.
about that connection. And I thought that was really wild when we started talking. And then you told me your hospital, and I was like, wait a minute, let me double check. So
I tell my husband all the time, I'm like, look, something happens to my spine or my brain. I don't care what hospital I end up at. You need to make sure they get me transferred to Barrow.
yeah.
So hopefully he remembers.
Here, put it in the calendar. Put it in the calendar. Put it on the calendar where you do like the daily reminder. Yeah, put it in the
Yeah.
calendar with a daily reminder just to make sure that he remembers. So, but praise God. So tell me about life now with your husband. How is everything back to normal? You know, do you guys still go out and do fun, spontaneous things, or is he still a little cautious, or what do you do? I mean, I know about the sports, but what about the other stuff?
Sure. You know, I think we took up running together in 2013. So we like to run, we like to travel, spend time with our daughter. We
Any
love to eat out.
marathons?
Yeah.
Hint,
Yeah.
hint, hint, hint.
Right.
You want to tell us about a marathon?
Oh, he and I run half marathons. And I ran a marathon. I think if anything, the brain injury taught me I can do the hard things, right? And it's actually on the back of my computer, do the hard things. And so one of the hard things as somebody with asthma is running, and got pretty good at half marathons and thought, well, let's do a marathon. So got one of those done. We just really appreciate each other. And I think if there's anything that really good came out of the brain injury, it was the appreciation and the understanding that you don't necessarily get tomorrow. And when you leave the house, it isn't guaranteed you'll come back. So make sure you leave the people in the house knowing that you love them and you appreciate them. And so really trying to live every day, understanding that while we don't want to be afraid of living, we want to live in the appreciation of what we have and what we've built together.
I'm an only child, and my parents, we always believed in saying, I love you. And my mom's big thing was, you don't know if I'll be here tomorrow, so say I love you today.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't want something to happen and you have that guilt of not having said I love you. So, I mean, I'm very, very big on saying I say I love you to people all the time because, you know, I do love and appreciate people. But that was one thing that my mom always taught me, was to make sure that we end our conversation, the three of us as a family, with saying I love you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we do the same. So.
Wow. So if someone wanted to contact a physician at Barrow because they've had a concussion, they want a second opinion, any additional insight, I'm quite sure you have a great deal on your website. Do you have the website address that you can share with us?
I do. It's the great place to go to see what we're doing, opportunities for treatment, or just to kind of know what Barrow's about. It's www.barrowneuro.org, and that's BARROWNEURO.org.
And what are some of the specialties that they would find there, or some of the areas that your physicians cover?
Oh gosh, definitely brain and spine. We have an outpatient concussion clinic. The physician who runs that, Javier Cardenas, is nationally known for his expertise in concussion and concussion-related injuries. His partner, Glennis Seaman, is been nationally recognized for the work she and a social worker do with domestic violence shelters. And recognizing TBI within the domestic violence population and helping to get the survivors treatment to deal with whatever impact on cognition the domestic violence they encountered may have had. We have an amazing oncology team, and I think I just read today that we have a branch of research for brain tumors, and they are actually doing human trials on a brain tumor intervention that does not include chemotherapy. So,
Wow.
right?
Did they just start the clinical trial?
They did.
Okay. And if someone wanted to sign up for that, they could find out more information on your website.
Absolutely.
Wow. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So as we close, I was just wondering, is there anything else that you would like to share with listeners about discovery, rehabilitation, triumph, anything that you can think of that we did not cover along the way?
I think humans don't give themselves enough credit for their ability to survive hard things, and hard things happen. Use your support system. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you any less than. It actually makes you wiser and stronger. If something doesn't feel right, if something doesn't sound right, don't hesitate to advocate for yourself or a loved one. And most of all, just rest in the knowledge that while you may not know what okay is going to look like in the future, you will be okay. It may be different than what you know now, but good things will happen again.
And they may be in a different package, but they'll happen again.
Absolutely. I once worked with a person who had horrible experiences in their life, and they focused on all of the negative things. And so I wrote up on a board, okay, this negative thing happened. What happened after that? And it was something good. And then something bad happened again. Okay, what happened after that? And it was something good. And then we did it one more time. And so I said, so what you've been telling me is that you want to erase the bad things that happened. Yes, definitely. And so I took my eraser and I erased the good and then the bad and then the good and then the bad. And the person said, so wait a minute. What you're saying is if I hadn't gone through that bad thing, the good thing that happened after might not have happened either. And I said, yeah. Or you may not have experienced it as a good thing. You may have just taken it for granted. But because you understood what hard was, you could also celebrate the good with a much more open heart.
Agreed. Agreed. Definitely agreed. I think there's so many miracles that go on around us and so many amazing things that go around us that we miss.
Right.
Because we weren't ready, and I always talk about readiness, emptying. Sometimes you have to empty in order to add or to fill. And because we're walking around with so many things that, sadness, disappointment, regrets, etc. till that's filled up our bag, that's filled up everything that we have. So we don't have the capacity for something good. So you got to let go of some of that stuff. All of the bad stuff if possible, but you got to let go of that stuff to make room to receive the good stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Tammy, you are amazing. You are amazing. I love your patience, your endurance, your new marathon, running.
Thank you.
Your amazing daughter. She's 20 years old, and where is she? Is she nearby?
She actually still lives at home while she's going to school.
Excellent. And your family and your support network and everything. Truly an amazing story. Please thank your husband. I forgot to say thank your husband for his service.
Sure.
And for helping us all. You are, like I said, just an amazing hero. And I believe that your story will help a lot of people along the way.
Thank you for helping me share it.
Thank you. Well, we'll be in touch. All right.
All right. Yeah. Thanks.